So I've been putting off making these kinds of videos because I know for a fact people don't think I'm an expert at this. People don't assume much because of the size of my platform or my account, and I just wanted to make it anyway because I do believe I have something of value to give in this area. And being that I haven't quit yet, I've been at this for many years. I know everyone is, most people are, but I have not gotten that lucky moment where I blew up or anything. I did blow up recently one time over sharing my first digital artwork on TikTok, and that did blow up. And that was the first time I've ever had that happen, and it was absolutely insane. Anyway, I wanted to make this video about how to be active on social media as an artist, specific tips that you can use, not necessarily to make yourself blow up, not to be extremely popular, but these are things that I do and would advise you to do if you just want to survive the grind of being active on social media, creating content, and doing all those sorts of things. It's specifically for artists of any medium. So here are the tips, about the 4 or 5 tips that I have on trying to maintain your social media. So here are the tips that I have for you. I don't know how many there are, I'll figure it out. I have a list with me that I'm going to be referencing of tips that I've written down. So here we go. One of the things that is obvious, and I know the only reason I'm putting this first is so that you know what I'm talking, that I know what I'm talking about. The obvious thing on Instagram for artists to be doing is IG Reels. And I know you may be thinking, it hasn't worked for me. It's not really producing the results that I was hoping for. Now, I thought the same thing at first, and I still gave it a shot. And the reason why I kept trying is not because of necessarily getting results. I kept trying because I wanted to, and because I had the content on my TikTok that would fit that feature perfectly, and I wanted to use it. And so instead of thinking of it in numbers, I saw it as an opportunity for potential numbers. Now, not in a way that is, I'll get popular for doing this, I'll blow up because of this, nothing of that sort, because if you think that with your content, you will burn out more quickly, because the likelihood of that happening intentionally is like slim to none, and it's extremely discouraging to have that not work out in the way that you were hoping. So I advise doing it for the sake of wanting to do it. So an example, I'll put a few things up here. I definitely recommend doing Reels, because you can always, I prefer making content on TikTok. It's a lot more fun for me. And there's so much more trends, sounds you can jump on, things for artists to participate in, and it's a lot simpler to think of content because a lot of it is made for you. You just have to use the sound. So I'm making content on TikTok all the time anyway. If I can recycle that and reuse it on Instagram, that's great. So I definitely recommend doing that. Again, I'm not saying this because it's the new hottest thing. I'm saying it because it could actually help you and be worth the work. So that's the first thing. It's an obvious thing. So I'm going to move on to maybe the lesser obvious things that you may be underestimating and haven't considered just yet. Also, one more thing I forgot to mention, you don't need to make interesting IG Reels. You do not need the iPad with Procreate and an Apple Pencil. You don't need it. You can do the trend of that, like the sketch versus final. For me, I'm doing sketch versus final, but I'm holding my phone and recording as I'm erasing and sort of moving my phone around, making it a little more interesting, but also it's just an extremely honest version of doing it because I don't have the iPad with the Apple Pencil and Procreate, so that's just not an option. That's another thing I wrote down. You don't have to have that tool to make it interesting. If you work with what you have, I promise you can make something interesting and worthwhile. Now let's move on to the second thing I have on my list here. Okay, so one of the things you will hear most often if you look at videos on YouTube about how to maintain growth, activity on your socials is posting to your stories. And I do see the value in that, and I do recommend that. Now, they're gonna say you have to be on your stories every single day, 5 to 6 things a day. You do not have to do that. Now, again, this is coming from a perspective of do you value numbers more than authenticity and consistency? If you value numbers, then go for it. You can make yourself post a story every single day and post at least 5 to 6 things every day. But if you're like me and many other creators, you have a reason of not being able to devote that much time to promoting yourself on social media. I think that's the case for most people. So if you have a job, you have a family, you have multiple jobs. Again, if you're doing content creation, creating art, maintaining socials, that's a whole nother job. So not everyone has the time to be on socials that often, and I don't even recommend that because I just don't think it's healthy. You're not a corporate business, you don't have a staff. It's just completely unrealistic to think that everyday people, independent creators, can do that. So I personally don't recommend that. For me, when I post to my stories, to make it easier so that maybe I post more frequently, if I'm creating artwork, a lot of the time, I've mentioned this multiple times, that music is the thing that inspires me the most. So it makes sense for me to share that music onto my story on Instagram. Now, you may be thinking, well, I wouldn't be interested in that, or what if your taste in music sucks, which is totally valid. I think that's another thing to consider if you wanted to post your music on Instagram. There are some people who post their artwork with a song attached to it, or they'll upload the picture and then just add a song to it, and they just leave it at that. If you just post an artwork with a song, it could just be really disengaging and random. But people who have larger followings are the ones who do that. I'm on a lower scale of that end of Instagram. So for me, instead, is I will post the songs that I'm listening to, and I'll put some interesting GIFs up around it, or interesting filters, etc., just to make it a little bit more accessible to the viewer, so it's not just some random thing that's up and they're not interested in. But also, sometimes I talk about the songs, sometimes I bring up and remind people that this song inspired this artwork, or music very often inspires my work, or I just like this song because of these lyrics, etc. I make it to where it's not boring. It'll either be funny or interesting or honest, something that's authentic that people can connect to, even if it's not surrounded by their interests or something they're deeply interested in personally. If it shows more authenticity of you and helps them understand you more, and you make it fun, people will love to see your stories. They'll be flocking to see what you're doing. So that would be the next tip I have for you, is you can post your music playlists to your stories, make it interesting. Say, hey, this is what I like about this song, or this song inspired this piece. Or you can run a poll of, hey, what music genre are you interested in? There are so many options for you, especially if you're a music lover like I am, on how to use your stories and maintain them without it feeling like a job. Now let's move on to the third thing. You don't have to always be posting art to your feed. And I know that this is obvious, I know that you've heard this, but let me give you specific ideas of what you can be posting instead of your artwork. You hear the obvious things like post your whip images. If you're like me, that's a little difficult because it's hard for you to create content altogether. I have so many health issues. I have multiple chronic illnesses. I can't work a job. I can't leave my house. So when I draw, it is me pushing aside the limitations. It's me pushing through the pain, through the physical exertion of doing it to express myself. So posting artwork is not completely possible all the time. So how have I been doing this since, I think, 2016 consistently? I'm going to tell you how. This is one of the reasons. Instead of always posting artwork, which is really impossible, you can also post things like, hey, I updated my Ko-fi, or hey, I posted a new YouTube video. I personally have put, hey, I updated my Gumroad, I added a new brush preset, my first one I made for the first time recently. I've posted YouTube clips or process videos, things of that sort that seem obvious, but I think a lot of people avoid. These can definitely be helpful in filling your feed with something valuable, interesting, but also not you creating something fresh off the get-go. Also, something you'll see bigger artists doing is they'll share some of their old artwork, do a throwback. Definitely recommend doing that. You'd be surprised how often people forget what you've made and what you create, or really how far you've come to. That's just something interesting to post. Nobody really gets irritated by seeing someone's old artwork. And if you're anything like me, I switched to art styles, and people definitely prefer my older art style over my newer one, which is cell shading line art style, whereas I used to do a painterly looking rendered thing a few years ago. So people love it when I share my old work because it's so different from my current body of work. And I'll show you an example of actually an IG reel I just shared of the sketch versus final of an old artwork, and I did get a comment on it saying, wow, this is so different from what you normally do. So that can't hurt at all, and really it does nothing but benefit you. You have every right to share your work. It doesn't always have to be new. If you really put in the time in your past work and you weren't rushing and you really thought heavily about what you were doing, the artwork that stands the test of time will always be valuable. People will always love to see it, if you get what I mean. I am exhausted. Oh, and another example is that to kind of combine information, so posting to your stories and posting on your feed, I love posting feedback from my patrons on my Instagram stories and responding to or showing my response to it. And I also love posting this stuff in my Instagram feed because it's a good way of plugging my Patreon without being too pushy. So that's also another thing I recommend. I know not everyone has a Patreon. It's extremely hard to get support on Patreon, so I understand if you're like, hey, I can't do that. But even just posting comments that really inspired you or were really encouraging to your story can also work just as well, if not even better, because for people to know that their feedback encourages you in such a positive way may want to incentivize them to keep commenting or keep being engaged with what you do. Not saying that it'll always happen that way, but it is a nice way of showing appreciation for them and also putting something interesting on your Instagram stories. Just something to consider. Okay, I'm gonna add one last tip. I believe this is the most valuable tip that I can give you, and that is recycling content. Which I know you think I may have just covered that, but let me explain. So, I primarily post on Instagram first, and then TikTok, and then on Twitter and Facebook. Everything else after that is very secondary. Even Twitter and Facebook are kind of secondary. So here's what I do to keep things fresh everywhere. So I post on Instagram and I batch up on content. Another video for another time, I guess. But I make sure to reserve the urge to automatically post to every social because it's killing any motivation you may have or any system you could have that would prolong your socials or you being able to maintain all of them, which is extremely difficult. So my advice is, if you post something on Instagram, hold off on posting it anywhere else, because you need to save all that energy and that valuable content for the platform that performs the most well for you, or you enjoy being on the most. Okay, so I post something on Instagram, at the longest, I'll wait 2 weeks to share it to another platform. And I alternate them as I see fit, but I never, unless, I mean, it's something groundbreaking, share one artwork to all my socials all at the same time, because it's just basically shooting myself in the foot, because that means now I'm not only expected to keep things fresh on one social, the one that does the best, but also on all the other ones that don't even do that well, and it just makes absolutely no sense to do. Sometimes I post more in-depth content on Instagram, or I'll just post a picture on Instagram, and if I post it on Facebook, I'll post the picture but with more in-depth information because it is more text-based, or because people on Instagram are just scrolling by. So sometimes I alternate between sharing just the image and a smaller caption on Instagram, and then maybe I'll go to Facebook with the same image and a longer caption, depending on how interesting it is or how I can word it differently. You have so many options to customize things to fit your needs, and it's very important to reserve the tools you have, to reserve the energy, reserve the resources. And if you have artwork, hold off on sharing all of it just at the same time. Just hold off, because it will pay off later on in the week, later on in the month, when you're stressed and you're like, I haven't posted on this one in a while. You'll no longer feel as drained and as pressured with keeping up with your socials, because you'll think, oh, thank goodness I didn't share that artwork all on the same social all in one day, because now here over on Twitter I can share that artwork that I've had for weeks on my Instagram, but maybe people on Twitter just didn't see it, or maybe they don't know I'm there, or they don't follow me there. There is incentive to holding on to things and not posting all of them right away. It's one of the most important things that you can do as an artist on social media. Now, I think there's more that I could possibly say, potentially, but I'll just leave it at that for now. You're getting this information from someone who's sitting in their house in their pajamas, who barely hit 300 followers recently. So I may not seem like a credible source for all of this, but I think it's important to understand that I've been doing this for so long, and I haven't had that, that lucky break. It just hasn't happened. So the fact that I'm still here means that I do have something to offer, whether it seems like I do or not, based on my numbers, because I'm not, my skill doesn't come from my numbers, it comes from hard work. So the fact that I've been able to survive this long should tell more than my numbers do, that what I'm doing works. Slowly, it's a slow trickle over time of me growing. I obviously have a lot, more work to do. I can only go up from here, and so can you, especially with these tips. So if you did like this video, please leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more. I post my time-lapse videos here of the coloring process of my artwork. I've started recording occasional vlogs. So if you did enjoy it, leave a comment, holler at me. I will obviously respond probably super quick, because I'd be so excited. But let me know if you want to see more content like this in the future. I have plenty of ideas. So yep, just let me know. I hope this helps. Don't give up. I know you can do this. And I hope to see you out there creating, doing your thing for a long time from now. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one, okay? See ya.